Joining me today on the Capital Show, Bobby Rechnitz. He is the chair of Golda Meir Commemorative Coin Committee. You are most welcome. I am sure that's going to be an interesting session, and I must thank you for accepting this invitation. Let me start by talking about Gaza, the situation surrounding a possible war. Would you think that Israel can succeed by eliminating Hamas, which is a war on Hamas, as we know?
Well, look, first of all, it won't be easy, but a lot will depend on the support of the international community, not just today or tomorrow, but more long-term and until the end. If we have the support of Western leaders, then we can resist the pressure to push Israel for a ceasefire, which has already started. Then it stands a good chance of succeeding to root out the Hamas terrorists.
Yeah, I have a question that everybody is asking right now. Does Israel action of Israel justified? I mean, do you think that the high casualty rate in Gaza airstrike in response to the deadly Hamas attack was justified?
I believe that all attacks to root out terror are acts of war, and the country has declared war. So this is not a retaliation for terrorism. This is a war that has begun to get rid of a terrorist element. There are always casualties of war, and that's unfortunate. Israel has the most humane army in the world. There are pictures that they show dropping leaflets. They send text messages. They ask the people to leave. There are innocent civilians. Many of them are hostages, just like the other hostages. Hamas should let them out. Egypt should let them come into the Sinai desert. There are corridors for those people, and there are warnings in time to let them go. But Israel must retaliate and go back and root out. You cannot fight half a war just like you can't be half pregnant. You have to take care of the entire thing. I think the way they go in is a humane way. I know that so many of the family members of the hostages are encouraging Israel to go in and root out this terror so that it doesn't disrupt future generations and terrorize future generations. There's no clear way to do it, but Israel is disproportionate, but not disproportionate in the eyes of its critics that they come in too strong. They're disproportionate, for example, when Gilad Shalit was released, 1,300 terrorists were released. If you reverse that now and you take the 200 hostages that Israel took, that would mean close to 1 million Hamas terrorists should be arrested. So Israel is disproportionate in terms of fact that their response is insufficient and doesn't reach the capacity that it should reach.
Mm-hmm. So you think that Hamas is a terrorist group? It's a branch from the Muslim Brotherhood that is threatening right now the stability in the region?
Hamas not only threatens the stability in the region, but Hamas has been spending tens and tens of millions of dollars over the last 20 years on campuses around the United States to start organizations such as Student Struggle for Palestine and others. They are trying to have an impact around the world in influencing and brainwashing people against Western civilization, not Israel in particular, Israel and the United States to be more particular.
You have excellent insights into Iran's actions. In your opinion, will Hezbollah open another military front against Israel?
Look, at the moment, they don't seem to have decided, or at least the Ayatollahs in Tehran haven't decided. Hezbollah has been built up as a deterrent towards Israel in case of an attack on Iran's genocidal nuclear weapons program. If it enters the war and takes a beating, this will severely weaken Tehran. They're waiting to see if Israel and the IDF get bogged down or overstretched in Gaza before making a decision.
Mm-hmm. Impressive. You have efforts in passing the Iron Dome legislation. What was your input about?
The Iron Dome, I had met with executives and scientists at Rafael Industries when they were working on the Iron Dome. Obviously, they needed help from the United States. It wasn't part of the Israel aid package. And at that time, the late Senator Daniel Inouye from Hawaii was very vibrant. And we came here, walked the halls of Congress and Senate. Normally, you need 2/3 approval for something like this. And through his efforts with Senator Kelly Ayotte and some others at the time, this was passed in record time because the Iron Dome is the humane defensive weapon. It can only be used to intercept an incoming rocket. It cannot be used in any offensive manner. So it was a very easy project to convince the United States to support. It's like asking somebody to give you a bulletproof vest. It only functions if somebody's shooting a bullet at you.
Mm-hmm. You were also lobbying for the Biden administration not to enter the GCPOA deal. Give us, please, more details about that campaign.
Look, the JCPOA was a bad agreement on paper, and the Iranians took all the benefits without adhering to the clauses. The fact is that during the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear weapons program, which the Ayatollahs and other senior Iranian leaders openly state, is to be used to wipe Israel off the map. These facts are hard to ignore, so we made sure that the decision makers in DC had at least the right information before signing on to a decision like that.
You criticized Thomas Friedman. Can we know why you disagree with him?
I criticized Thomas Friedman growing up. Initially, I read his books and I thought, here's a man that really speaks out on what he believes in. But unfortunately, Thomas Friedman, like many others historically, they've been wrong on so many issues for so many years, but they keep pushing a political and ideological agenda as neutral analysis. Friedman, like many others, was also at the front of pushing Israel towards accommodating extremists and terrorists, arguing that the more Israel gives, the quieter the region will be. That notion, sadly, was struck from the pages of reality Saturday, October 7th, when 1,300 Israelis and other nationals were brutally massacred.
I have a question because you are an expert in Israel politics. Do you think that domestic protest in Israel end because of what's happening now in Gaza? And does this war save Netanyahu in politics?
There's two parts to that question. All the domestic strife in Israel, which was really all over internal matters, all that's put to the side right now. Unfortunately, enemies unite people, and Israel is as united as it could ever get for unfortunate reasons. I would have hoped to see the unity come before that, but people are passionate on both sides of the spectrum, passionate on both sides of the argument. But one thing that they're never opposed to one another is the safety and security of the Jewish nation and the Jewish country. I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is fighting a war now with elements that he identified 20 and 30 years ago before anybody even recognized. He's speaking on the threat of Iran for decades before anybody ever identified it. He foresaw this, and he's now fighting the battle that unfortunately he tried to avoid because all his persuasion in the world and at the UN and at Congress, so much of it was not adhered to. And as a result of that, this is the war that he was always concerned would erupt. And I believe that he will do a very good job in extinguishing it. And I believe that the Israeli public feels very satisfied with the war cabinet he put together, bringing in Minister Benny Gantz, who's a general. I believe that they have the public entirely behind them. And the outcome of this will be possibly a new government, but I believe a government headed by Netanyahu.
Yeah, you are the chairman of, as we introduced you, the Golda Meir Commemorative Coin Committee.
Yes.
Can you tell us what it is about and how Golda Meir influenced your life?
Well, as a young child, I admired Golda Meir. There's so many parallels between what happened now and the 1973 war in terms of Israel just not properly estimating or underestimating the other side's capabilities. And it's just tragic. This is one of the most tragic things that's happened in history, as many people point out, on a one-day basis since the Holocaust. But Golda Meir was truly a leader. Politically, I didn't always agree with her. She was the head of the Labor Party. She was what today would be called a progressive. But I think that when you look at someone who was one of the female leaders of the world, and this goes back to the 1970s, you still don't see that today. You don't see today many women leaders in the world that have the courage to stand up and do what's right. And here's a woman who came here from the Ukraine. She never could have succeeded in the Ukraine to be the success she was, but she came to the United States and got an education. And with those values, then she moved on to Israel and made Aliyah. So here's a woman who grew up in the United States, became the prime minister of Israel. Every opportunity was open to her because Israel is the greatest democracy in the Middle East. It's just it's a mirror image of the United States in terms of democracy, in terms of windows of opportunity. And here she successfully headed the country. So I believe that she's a beacon for others to follow her example. And in doing the Golda Maer commemorative coin, we're trying to enforce and enlighten the new members of Congress. There are 90 new members of Congress and Senate that came on this past January. Many of them have grown up in the university system in the United States in the last 15, 20 years, or they've been listening to the media. And unfortunately, they've been influenced with more opinion than fact. And when you strengthen the United States-Israel relationship and you have members sign on to create a commemorative coin, which would be the first time the Mint issued a coin in honor or in memory of a foreign leader, what you're doing is you're strengthening that 75-year bond and you're carrying it forward. And you're also educating these new members in Congress about the truth and the reality of the relationship between Israel and the United States.
Yeah, you started your answer by saying that these days are similar to 1973, and this is the second time. This is Israel announced war after years. So, do you think that what happened, Hamas crossing the border and or the wall, is it like a failure, security insecurity, or Israel was surprised, or what happened in fact?
I believe that Israel was caught off guard. It's a shocking failure. It's nothing that can be addressed now. Now everybody has to fight the war. And the war, by the way, is not only the military war on the ground in Israel, it's the war of goodwill and transparency and explaining Israel's position for people like myself and thousands of others in the United States to use our ability to make sure that the message of truth reaches out to members and lawmakers and legislators in government. But no, nevertheless, it was a horrible breakdown in the intelligence community of Israel, of the United States. It was a horrible breakdown in the military community. It just shows you how deep Hamas's training and how deep their knowledge is. And, you know, one of the interesting items is that the targeted groups of IDF members who went into Gaza, they've come back with information. And they're coming back with packets from vests of soldiers there, or perhaps informants giving information. They have detailed plans of every one of these settlements, every one of these kibbutzim, showing where the nursery is, where the room for the nursery is, where the infirmary. Where did they get the detailed plan? People keep talking about the innocent civilians of Gaza. There are civilians of Gaza who are not Hamas members that are also not innocent. These are people that are going in, doing business, providing jobs. They have employment in Israel. They're coming back, giving them these plans. They're drawing it out. Why would somebody draw out the map of where a nursery is located? How did they know exactly where to go in? So there's been a breakdown of intelligence, not only in the military level, but a trust that was built between the Israeli citizens in that area and the Gazan citizens. And they were complicit in it as much as Hamas was.
My last question, will you think that the two-state solution is no longer exists, no longer a possibility? And what about the negotiation that has been stopped between Saudi Arabia and Israel?
Look, I believe that Saudi Arabia is very compromised right now. They're the second largest Muslim population. They have to answer to their citizens. The optics are very bad, but Saudi Arabia has been very successful in the last few years. It may have only come to the news in the last couple of years, but they've been working with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was a visionary in this area, and they understand that they have so many mutual interests. There's so many reasons for them to have cooperation and have normalization with the United States, but at the same time, they are sensitive to their citizens, and they should be sensitive to them. So I believe for the time being, this is on hold. But I don't believe, aside from the public statements that were made, I don't believe that Saudi Arabia will allow the Palestinian terrorist behavior to define what they would like to see as an arrangement between the Palestinian people and Israel. I believe that will come back on the table once this conflict is over.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Mr. Bobby Rechnitz. I'm sure that it was a very informative and thoughtful interview. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.